This is Becoming Inclusive from the Kaleidoscope Group, where we're thinking differently about diversity, equity, and inclusion for more empowered people at work. We're committed to real change, and that begins with real conversations. Welcome in.
Hi, I'm Reginald Ponder, and welcome to another episode of Becoming Inclusive. We talk about this all the time. You just don't become inclusive. You have to work at it. And what I've learned is that I need help in working with it. And so I have with me my co-host, Catherine Potts. Hey, Kat.
Hey.
And we brought back, as usual, Brian Johnson. Hey, Brian, how are you?
Good. Good to be back.
Man, look, we hadn't talked in a while, and sometimes we have these pre-discussions, so I know what you're going to talk about. This time we have not, and I like that too, because what happens is that since this is a discussion, we get to explore as opposed to repeat. And so in this one, we're going to talk about constantly creating inclusive environments. A lot of times people feel like you might tolerate me, but you're not really accepting me. And we're going to talk about that. And Kat, you found a quote that you really want to kind of kick this discussion off with. Let's hear it.
Yeah. So the quote is, "Everyone is welcome is drastically different from we built this with you in mind. People don't want to go where they are merely tolerated. They want to go where they are included." And that quote really hit me because it's interesting in all the workspaces that I've been in professionally thus far they say it's inclusive, right? They say it is, but then I look around and I don't necessarily connect everything in there or feel like it connects to other cultures, right?
So it's really interesting that you say that, because let's break that quote down. There's two parts to that. There's the everyone is welcome. And I think what you're saying is that that's not enough, but everyone is welcome seems welcoming. Yes, no?
I would say it seems welcoming. I think it's just sort of a blanket statement a little bit. Like it's just something nice to say and something to have there, because you're not going to have a sign or have some verbiage that says everyone's not welcome.
Well. In fact, there's some cases that are at the Supreme Court now dealing with servicing LGBTQ people. There's a cake bakery case, and so there are places that are saying you are not welcome. So this is different. This is saying everyone's welcome. Come on in and enjoy yourself. Jump in here, Brian.
Yeah, I'd say too, we when we have companies or teams or divisions or departments, I think a lot of times we take people for granted to a certain extent, in that we don't think anybody's going to figure out that we're not really practicing that. It's the LGBTQ folks. They'll never know that we have that it makes us uncomfortable to talk about LGBTQ issues, because we'll just avoid it. So they'll never figure it out. Nobody will ever figure out we're uncomfortable talking about racial issues, because we'll just avoid them. And so it just becomes, whether it's a leader, whether it's a part of the stakeholders or staff, if you don't engage and talk about things that may be a little uncomfortable for you, it's obvious to the other people that you're avoiding, or it's obvious to the people whose LGBTQ issues are a way of life for me. If I'm gay, if I'm a person of color or whatever it may be in the United States, being a person of color is a way of life every day for me. So I'm going to recognize from 10 miles away that you're uncomfortable, number one. Number two, that you're avoiding it. And essentially you are avoiding a part of me by doing that. So we really want to avoid doing that.
Go ahead, Kat.
You just made me think too. It's like, who's coming up with the welcoming standard, right? Because if you're saying, everybody is welcome, if you are saying that and you're not saying certain people aren't, well, who's decided exactly what that means and what is making everybody? And I'm curious whether that's one person, right, or like a team of people, and is that team diverse or not?
Right, and great point there. For me, it comes, I like to use simple analogies, right? That I can put my arms around. That's how I learn. So the way I think of things is, think of your family dynamics, right? All of us have a relative that we despise, or we all have a relative that we really just do everything we can to avoid that relative, right? And that's easy because then we don't have to have conversations, right? We don't have to engage. We're avoiding the uncomfortable conversations with that particular relative. And it's nice if that relative is 3,000, 2,000 miles away, or even in another country, because then we can do the proverbial Merry Christmas, Happy Birthday, and be done. So that relates to what we're having in corporate America today within companies, right? In that it's not enough just to be nice. It used to be enough in the 70s and 80s and 90s just to be nice to avoid lawsuits and so forth. But nowadays, it's different. It's a different lifestyle. It's a different world to where social media has done really good things in this space, in my opinion, is that it's held us all to a higher standard. It's not enough just to say, I'm praying for you, or whatever the catch is if someone passes away and you say, well, I'm praying for you. Well, people don't take that anymore. It's like, let's have a real conversation instead of that. So it's important for us to realize that you can't run away from conversations. So it's not that there are more issues today in the workplace. It's that now we are engaging with folks. So now you have a potential with that relative that you have to engage with now. Now she or he may offend you, or he or she, or you may offend he or she, that relative that you're dealing with. Same thing in the workplace. When you engage and have real conversations, there's more risk involved. You may offend somebody. You may say something wrong. You may be inaccurate, which is not necessarily offensive. You just may be inaccurate. So it's important for us to realize that though there may be some discomfort in the beginning, the long-term value of having real conversations is going to increase your bottom line. It's going to make for people wanting to stay at your company longer and not leave and not look on the Indeed every day and try to get out of there. So it helps to build your culture to have these real conversations.
Well, so Brian, you talk about analogies. I want to get into a real work situation. Is that your work and there's a happy hour. So everybody is welcome. But what you see is that some people don't come. There's no discrimination here.
Right.
The notice was sent out to the whole company. It says we're having a happy hour. Everybody's welcome, but only certain people show up. So how does this fit into your thoughts about being welcoming and more inclusive?
Yeah, great question and great example. So happy hour for me as a non-drinker, I don't drink. So happy hour implies to me alcohol. Though there may be appetizers, though there may be food there, happy hour for me implies alcohol. And I don't like being around drunk folks, right? People act differently when alcohol is in place. Some people say it's truth serum, whatever. But people tend to be a little loose with their lips. They tend to be a little, sometimes ridiculous, but sometimes it's just a different vibe when alcohol is involved. So that I don't like the smell of alcohol. I don't have a problem if someone else wants to drink alcohol. I don't have a problem with that at all. It's not like I'm a holier than thou. It's not that at all. It's just that when alcohol is involved, people act differently. And I don't really like dealing with that type of dynamic in a social atmosphere. So that would be my reaction to the.
So what's interesting here is that I don't drink either. So I would always make the calculus if not going might mean something career-wise. So, geez, I think I need to go. Right. So maybe I'll leave a little bit earlier. But what I want to push back on a little bit is that, so are you saying that you believe that because it has the alcohol that it just might not be welcoming?
Well, I'm going to hop in just really quick
because
good. The company that I used to work for previously, that was one of the incentives, right? Oh, we're going to do a happy hour. We're going to get a beer tap in the office for all of this. And that was like one of the biggest pushes, like at the office for like what, and it just happened that everybody in our office was, like some wine time or like, we're beer drinkers. So it was great. But like the thing about it is that was like the main incentive outside of like maybe Chick-fil-A breakfast sometimes. Right. So it's like this uneven balance of like, you're going to advertise that, this happy hour is as its main thing, but like, that's not really what jives for everybody. But it is this like great assumption, that's what's going to get people, fired up and going. So to Brian's point, though, it's like that doesn't connect for everybody, but it is an example, Reggie, that is, I feel like I'm on social media and someone's like putting stuff about their job is because their job hosted a happy hour. Honestly.
Right. Yeah, no, great point, Kat. And if I could respond to that too, in that, and to yours, Reggie, is that, okay, with the happy hour example, as a non-drinker, okay, I need to flex a little bit. It's not all about me either. It's not all about just what I want. And I have to be perfectly happy with every office function that occurs. That's not what I'm saying either. But to your quote earlier, Kat, to where if I'm a part of building what we're doing, if I'm a part of if I have a say-so in the culture that we have that I'm sharing with everybody in here, that if I know there's happy hour today, but then there's going to be whatever, like you say, Chick-fil-A breakfast the other day that I may enjoy more, or there maybe is a golf outing if I'm a golfer, or there'll be maybe a movie night or a movie or whatever. If we have a variety of things and I know something else is coming that I may enjoy more, okay, I'll suck it up and flex a little bit and be a team player in going to the happy hour or whatever it may be, or the book club or whatever it may be. I'll flex a little bit more knowing that my voice is heard, knowing that we have a variety of things going. And the goal is to include everybody. So we all need to chip in and flex a little bit, even though it may not be the ideal fit for what we all want to do on a Friday afternoon or evening after work.
I love that, Brian, because you brought us to the second part of the quote, which is, we built this with you in mind.
Right.
And so the difference is, and man, you made this so clear. See, this is why I like talking to you, by the way, is that you're saying, okay, you're having happy hour, but did you think about the other people? Mm-hmm. And when you think about the other people, you built this with me in mind, because now you have McDonald's breakfast, hint, hint, Kat.
Hey, I don't eat McDonald's.
You did not say that to Ponder household, but anyway.
Right.
So the fact that we're going to have a breakfast or we're going to have a book club is that we've thought about the fact that there are lots of different things for people. So if we take it away from drinking and we only had golf outings, that's a problem. Right. Because we haven't built it with that in mind. It's like there's a lot of people that just don't play golf. So I really like the fact that you brought it to the second part. The first is that, yeah, you're saying everyone's welcome, but what you do doesn't welcome everyone.
Right. And if I could throw a little point there with the golf outing, right? Because they're common, and but golf outings are not just not for people who don't like golf or who don't golf, right? Because golf is 4 hours minimum of your time. And it's also, you're not really interacting with everybody. You're interacting with the other three people in your foursome. So it's really not, as we look at our time, if I have kids at home, I'm not going to leave for 4 hours for my spouse to have to take that while I'm hanging out and with three people. Hanging out with three people is not really a way to build our culture. So anyway, just the golf thing is really common. That's why I like to kind of point that out, that, it's not always so simple as that, well, I like drinking or don't like drinking, or I like golf, I don't like golf. There's a lot of factors in there. And we all are, in today's day, 2022, everybody, you have to have a 2-person income nowadays because everything is so expensive. So we have to do that. So you have to manage your time and your family life, and to a lot of the male folks, not everybody has a stay-at-home wife that will take care of the kids and do all the work at home, because that's where a lot of times leadership gets involved, right? Or people say, oh, the woman, oh, Kat, you're pregnant. You can't come back. You're not a good work candidate for us because we need you to be here. Well, yeah, executive leader who's a male. Not everybody has a spouse at home taking care, doing all the good stuff, doing all the real work, right? The hardest work in the world is being a parent. So doing the laundry, doing the cooking, laundry, and whatever. And all you have to do is show up 9 to 5 and go to work. That's a great deal. I'd love to take that if I had a choice, one way or the other. That's how my father grew up, right? He was responsible for bringing home the bacon. My mom brought home the bacon and did all this other stuff. And 2022, we're not doing that anymore. It's more of a partnership when we have a marriage and raising kids. We need to acknowledge that in the workplace and say, hey, raising kids is a partnership. It's not a negative to have a woman that is getting pregnant along their career.
This probably really fits really well with Kat, because you have to grapple with this being a relatively new mom. And it's really interesting, Brian, that you bring this up, because I think sometimes pregnancy is tolerated. You know, it's like we gotta go through the process. We gotta tolerate it, but do we really look at how do we service or include the people who go through those processes? Obviously, I'm talking about women, but do we really look at inclusion as opposed to we'll tolerate it because we know it has to happen and we try to figure our ways around it? So,
well, I think in that example too, it usually only comes in the form of like, maternity leave, maybe.
Right, exactly.
And that seemingly like is enough when, there's a lot of different things that can go on that can happen like throughout the day, appointments. There's so many things that there's not always flexibility for, depending on where you work. And it's hard. It's like, we live in a society too that does push, right, having children. Like that's, even though it's 2022, there's still that stigma, like that's what you're supposed to do with your life, is have a family and have kids. But we don't really then create environments that kind of support that. And it's just, oh, well, you're pregnant, we'll give you maternity leave, maybe, not everybody, maybe. But in the interim, you need to show up to work, be 100%, can't have any days off, can't be sick. And it's, there isn't really that support there, I feel like, holistically, at least in the US.
Right. And what does it look like, right? What does it look like to support both a husband and a wife as they go through the birthing process and the raising the child process? It's time off for the mom and time off for the dad. It's also maybe offering through your employee assistance program, making sure there's postpartum depression counseling available, right? There's making sure that there's a room delineated so women can breastfeed, and there's a refrigerator in there so they can keep their breast milk in there and not have to have it, mixed in there with everybody's foods and all that kind of stuff, just for organization's sake and privacy's sake, versus there's something wrong with milk, right? With breast milk. So those are just little things that can be done that help, again, to our theme here, having people create this environment instead of walking into something that you have to completely flex to. And the organization, though they say everyone is welcome, though they say, all that, it's not, what do they say? It's not what you say, it's what you do that people recognize, right?
Well, you just built that with women in mind, because you didn't give a couple examples. You were building the whole scenario and saying you are welcome. So when I look at this, Brian, I look at this and I saw this someplace else, so I didn't make this up myself, but I saw this with just basically simple tolerance, like we'll tolerate you, whatever it is. We'll tolerate the fact that Ramadan is here, and we'll tolerate that, But then there's the next thing, this civility, which is basically being polite and being a little bit more courteous and having a little bit more courtesy. But then there's that next step, which is real acceptance, saying we know that a lot of people are celebrating Easter, and that's one, but we know people are celebrating Ramadan and other things, and so we're going to accept them all. Right. We're going to accept them all, and we're going to build this with that in mind. So companies what you're doing, Reggie, is not necessarily you're converting to something else. You're embracing the human being that has already embraced something. So you don't have to be completely knowledgeable about everything, but just by embracing the people that work there. Because, everybody talks about, it's a family environment. Oh, we got to work like a family. Oh, we got to work like a team. Well, in a team, in a family environment, you embrace each other. Even though we may be different, even though we may look different, sound different, age differently, whatever it may be, embracing someone means accepting whoever they are, where they are at that moment in time, and not looking at them like with an asterisk on. I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you. No. This is a conversation, Kat. I see you.
And that's important because it's going to impact how they show up to work, right?
That's right.
Because there's probably some listeners, that are like, well, why does it matter? Outside of just wanting to be conscious and caring of other people and empathetic and all of that, it's also because when you go to work, being tolerated, you don't feel included. You don't feel a part of anything besides just being, it's stressful, right? Whereas like if you are feeling all of these things and you feel like it was made for you and you're comfortable, whatever that looks like for you, then you're going to work better. Your output's going to be better. And I think it can be a little intimidating too, right? Oh no, as a CEO, now I have to worry about everybody's comfort.
Right,
so
right.
then you have to bring that in, but it doesn't have to be like that literal.
Right.
Where you have to make sure every single person is comfortable, but like just this everybody's welcome blanket thing is just not enough. And
also go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that makes me think of like the opportunity, even when you're sharing what benefits are, do more than just say our benefits are right here, right? Like read them. This is what it is. Great. That do more than that. There's an opportunity even just in that area when you're onboarding.
Yeah, exactly right. And it's a big deal. And, we get that a lot of times with people, in leadership. But, this is all about, it's not just about leaders, it's about everybody.
Yep.
But a lot of times people say, oh, I have an open door policy. If you have to say you have an open door policy, you don't have an open door policy, right? Because leadership nowadays is going to the person. Right, is going to that person's environment, meeting them where they are. Yeah, they may come into your office at some point, but you have to engage. So it's not the blanket statement of open door policy. You have to do more than that. Like you're saying, it's not just a blanket statement anymore, and that's a big deal. And
the open door, it's like just saying that because your open door might seemingly be a little intimidating for some people,
right?
Or and that even when I know some offices now, they'll do the transparent offices. So it's all glass and even the cubes are that way. And I think in some ways that's helpful. But I think just doing that where everyone can just see each other doesn't necessarily engage everybody.
Yeah. And it has more to do with the personality of that leader, right? That's if that personality is welcoming and you're able to connect with that person who may be the leader at any point, that's an open door policy. It's just the personality itself.
Yeah.
So you could have you can be outside and still be a closed door policy if you're not somebody that's approachable. But also to your point earlier, Kat, too, as far as people feeling comfortable or welcome, a part of the culture there. What does that look like when it doesn't work out well, right? If you have a bad culture, that means people aren't coming up with new ideas because they're like, hey, I'm gonna save my great ideas because I'm going somewhere else. I'll be out of here in 2 months. Someone who just can't wait for 5 o'clock to come around so they can leave 5 minutes early, find any way to leave 5 minutes early, or will show up a few minutes late, right? Because they can't stand being there. So you're not going to get their best work. They're not going to be devoted to the organization. There's no loyalty there. So it matters whether people are giving you your best work, right? There's no leader alive that would say that, well, I only want 50% of their production. No, I want all of you. I want you to be here. I want you to put in extra hours. I want you to put in, I don't want you to be 95. I want you to think about this all the time. I want your great ideas. I want all this. Well, if you want that, then you have to make sure, number one, that your culture allows for that and that your culture is worthy of that. And number two, if you're a part of that culture and you're not a leader, you have to make sure that those folks are being inclusive also. It's not that we can't just look at the leaders and say, well, that's her fault. Well, that's her responsibility. He's the leader. She's the leader. He's the CEO. She's the manager. So I don't have a responsibility here. No. Everybody has responsibility to build a great culture, and everybody has a responsibility to manage it, to engage with it, to add to it, and also to make sure that everybody is allowed to be themselves in that culture.
It kind of goes really back to what you talked about in the beginning, Brian, is that, it's not so much what you say, it's what you do. And when you can see that manifested in a organization, and I mean, we talked about it, you're like, it's built for me, or it's built with me in mind, not for me, because that means that it might not be built for other people. But when it's built with me in mind, that means that it's being a little bit more inclusive. And it brings me back to the word belonging, which some people have a real problem with, belonging, what's all this soft stuff that you're talking about here? But studies show that belonging at work is just as important, is second to belonging at home. And so you brought up the whole thing about, hey, we got that relative, and you talked about home, but it's actually not so far away. because we spend so much time at our work jobs that we come up with these terms like, work home, work spouse, our work office, whatever it is. But we home and work are not so far divorced from each other as a lot of people might think. And when we talk about belonging, specifically, you talked a little bit, Brian, about this issue of having these tough conversations. The problem is that you can have an open door policy, but you still don't have the tough conversation. And surprising enough, maybe to a lot of people, is that 37% of Black folks and white folks say that they don't want to have those conversations.
That's right. And I would argue, Reggie, that you can say all the right things. You can have all these activities for whatever month theme it is. You can have all the billboards around. But if you can't have an authentic conversation with someone who's a different culture, a different religion, born in a geographically a different area, if you can't have an authentic conversation with somebody along those lines, along whatever line of difference it may be, the billboards, posters don't mean anything. The activities every month don't mean a darn thing. And whatever comes out of your mouth doesn't mean anything, right? It doesn't matter unless you can have an authentic conversation. Unless you can have a little more depth to the conversation, right? Because people say, people often say, well, you don't mix work and life. Why? Because it may be different than what I want, maybe different than who I am. It's crossing a barrier of difference. So nowadays, 2022, we should be able to cross those barriers with some skill. And that's, what we always talk about. And I think we're doing better as a country, as a world. With our international clients, we're seeing growth there as well. I think there's been a lot of growth, but there's a lot more to be done.
And so I want to throw in, and you said with some skill, I want to throw in and with some grace.
Yes.
Because sometimes we're not going to have the skill. Sometimes we're not going to have the language. Sometimes we're not going to have, we're not even going to understand the situation that well. But if we have a little bit of grace that goes along with the skill that we may have, then that can go a long way, because that grace, that empathy, that understanding, which you talked about in a prior one. So I'm stealing stuff from you. Thank you so much, sir. Is very important. Go ahead, Kat.
No, I mean, just to sort of also, piggyback off what Brian's saying. I mean, if you're expecting someone to be somewhere 5 out of the 7 days in an entire week, there's going to be crossover, period.
That's right.
And we have to find a way to make that those shifts back and forth more graceful and more consistent, because it's a lot to ask for people to separate those two constantly.
Yeah. And you're asking a lot of that individual, right? Okay, yeah, we're paying a salary for you, but unless you want them to only, give you the bare minimum, you got to give a little bit more as an organization, as a culture, as a team, as a department, as a leader, or as a coworker. You got to give a little more. You got to take a little risk and have a little more depth to the relationship that you may have, if you want more from the other person. If you just want to check the clock, come in at 9, leave at 5, and not think about it, and not really have a life at work. Well, okay, that's one thing, but I would doubt that many people want that in 2022.
Wow. Well, I'm checking the clock. so thank you so much, Brian. I'm checking the clock, and I just want to kind of end on the quote that you brought up, Kat. Is everyone is welcome is drastically different from we built this with you in mind.
Right.
You guys really shed some light on that. This could be a long conversation, because building this with you in mind is intentionality, is important. And then the second part of the quote is that people don't want to go where they are merely tolerated. Right. They want to go where they are included. And
let me add to those real quick. What we're talking about is including people is easy. This isn't rocket science. This is easy stuff that's easily attainable. I'm sorry, go ahead, Rich.
Right. No. You're always saying everything's easy.
I know.
and the reason I love that, Kat, I love the pushback, because it's not easy. If it was easy, it would have been done yesterday.
No, not necessarily. It's not because it's difficult that it's not done yesterday. It's because we have other priorities, right? It's because If it's a spouse that I'm dealing with every day, that I have to deal with every day, that's a priority. We're going to do this easy stuff now in order to have a healthy relationship because I don't want to be divorced. Well, if we use that same mentality that our work relationships are important, very important, we're going to move that to the priority list up to the top. It's not that it's difficult. That the reason why I would push you back, Reggie, it's not that it's difficult. We don't do these things, right? Because thinking of somebody else, thinking of what's pleasurable to you, Reggie, or how you like to do things, Kat, that doesn't take any effort from me. That's not hard for me to do, but it has to be a priority for me to be able to see it instead of looking the other way and not paying attention to any of that. It's very easy.
It is hard for me to end this discussion because we could go on for a long, long time. Brian, I really appreciate you joining us again. That is my co-host, Catherine Potts. That is Brian Johnson. This is Becoming Inclusive, and we want to invite you back to another episode. We'll see you guys next time.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks for joining us, and a special thanks to our subscribers. Consider becoming one today. Becoming Inclusive is presented by the Kaleidoscope Group, your full-service diversity, equity, and inclusion partner serving clients worldwide. Learn more and continue the conversation at kgdiversity.com.